access, if not eliminate, access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women.
I genuinely didn't expect him to come in and talk about someone who believes the best thing for her was that she had an abortion to get out of a abusive relationship. He wants to make that illegal and doesn't give anything beyond it other than, well, we just need to make her life happy. Well, she's stuck with a man who's abusive.
Let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is,
why would Vance bring up an example?
Say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography. There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today.
Probably would be alive. It's a safe bet.
Of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women.
That's not the reason. Like, it's an amazing stance he's got here.
Pregnancy is something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their
He genuinely thinks that in Ohio they voted to keep abortion because they don't feel comfortable keeping kids, not that they want to be allowed the right to an abortion.
And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm
amazing.
On the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
It's such an odd strategy from the guy. I find it fascinating because it's basically, he started his answer on abortion by saying, well, I met a woman and she came to me and she was like, oh, I'm glad I had an abortion. I didn't think I had a choice that was best for me because my husband was beating the shit out of me, was abusive, and I didn't want to have the child. And because of abortion, I could get out of the relationship. I didn't have to have a child with him and see him every day and have him beat the shit out of me for a long time. All these things. And J.D. Vance is like, and that's how I know we've failed to earn their trust. That's, from a rhetorical angle, he's terrible because you want to be able to connect people emotionally. So if he wanted to say something along those lines and say, that's when I know our social services have failed. We should have been able to be there for her so she wouldn't have been in an abusive relationship, and we could have taken care of her to ensure that she wouldn't need to have an abortion. That was, I think, what he's saying. Like, feel free to correct me if anyone disagrees, but I think that's the direction he was like going. But that's not what he did. Instead, it was this weird disconnected thing that I don't think anyone was energized by or excited by in any capacity. Like, he wants to for sure talk women out of having abortions, but like the it's the old line of, if you really cared about the child and it was about the child, then you would immediately go forward and push for the entire country to have wholly universalized health care, free child care, that mothers have maternal leave for 10 months or 12 months or 2 years paid for by whoever. Like, you would remove any barrier that may exist to the world to making pregnancy a pain in the ass. Sweden, for example, has insane versions of this. The government sends you a box, if you're a mother, of all the stuff you may need. Like, you get taken care of with a lot of leave that can swap between partners. It's a lot. They take away all of the pain of that part of it, because what they want is they want you to, if you want to have a kid, you should have a kid. And you shouldn't go, well, my life isn't ready for it. I'm not there. It's not set up. And like that setup. But the thing is, we know that the anti-abortion people don't give a fuck about children, because, and that's, I think, where Walsh's response is perfect. He's like, you want to make life better for children? We do that. I've done that in places where we have abortion. We also have these other things. We have the lowest teen pregnancy rate, and also, by the way, lower abortion rates there too, because of all these things. They've got a huge shift that's happened where he's at that is doing these things he's talking about. It's more emotionally conducive to people being excited about him as a candidate, and therefore Harris. But JD Vance's response is like a weird intellectual mishmash of things he should be saying. Very odd. Dr. Black says JD Vance is seemingly a moron. I'm trying to figure out, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out why the fuck he picked Vance. And I don't mean that in like a jokey way. I mean in that in the, I do not know why Vance was the pick. As far as we can tell, Peter Thiel and his ilk aren't donating more money to Trump than normal or anything like that. It's very strange. And he's not a pick I'd make, or I think a lot of people would make. And so it's the kind of thing where it's like, what's the setup we really want to care about, and how do we want to care about it? What are we doing here? And I don't know. Like, I actually don't know. I mean, his wife, his children are multiracial, which is not a thing for Republicans. That's great. Laura Loomer saying that Kamala's going to make the White House smell like curry. And they asked J.D. Vance about it because his wife's Indian. And he's like, well, people should be allowed to cook any food they want, because he doesn't want to deal with this stuff. It's so fucking weird. So weird. Anyway, back to weird.
Now to America's. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Yep. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience.
I mean, it fits with a huge amount of experience. Just in general, ask Australia. It's such an odd response. Also, America doesn't need help with guns.
This is just your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress,
they do not
I
leave
sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work.
Good.
I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish.
Just as a note for anyone, like this connecting emotionally with the thing that everyone knows. My opponent is not actually a sociopath, but he said it better than that. It's a really nice touch, because Walt said a thing, and it's why I actually believe he empathetically feels for these people, whereas Vance I don't think does actually. When you are with parents who have lost their children in a school shooting or lost their children tragically, you feel any mention of a child or notice of a child. Pictures on the wall was Vance's thing, cartoon playing in the background, things like that. Everyone is on pins and needles about, because everything reminds a parent of their dead child, and everyone feels it in a pretty hardcore way. It sticks with you. Shit sticks with you. So I really appreciated Vance saying it's a nice emotional touch from him.
Schools, they don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Yep. Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator?
It's a thing that for those who know, that you know. If you don't, you'll find out. Talk. This is a thing that hits really like my soft spot on my armor. If you ever see, and go watch, especially you kids, go watch Bowling for Columbine. You might see a bald, weird-looking guy in it who shaved his head. Young kid. He was like 20-something. He's like half my age at the Bowling for Columbine was fascinating. And the reception to it I found really horrifying. It was a very simple film. The film is actually not anti-gun. Michael Moore was an NRA card-carrying member, owned guns, was from Michigan, for God's sake. Everyone there owns guns. And the point of it was asking what makes America special, what makes America different. Because Canada has a bunch of guns. There's guns people all over Canada. But Michigan people know this. They go across to go hunt. Hunting is a thing in a lot of places. Other parts of the world have some level of guns. Other places require guns to even be a citizen. Everyone, like, there's countries where this is the case. There's all this shit. But what makes America have these things happen? Postal shootings, Columbine shootings, school shootings, what makes them so prevalent? Can't fix them. The reaction against it, and this is what you, if you can, go watch Bowling for Columbine and then go watch the response to it. It was so outsized and so nonsensical. It's incredible. The movie's about why are we so scared? Why are we living in this perpetual, affective state of terror? Why is this happening here? But everyone was like, he just hates guns. He wants to take your guns. It became this very specific thing. The way Americans have tied guns to machismo, masculinity, and identity in a way that it's on the right and amongst gun owners, it is a very sensitive personal thing for them. It makes it very difficult to have these kinds of conversations. And so having Waltz, I think, say it as he did, I really appreciate it. I'm just commenting, but this hits me really squarely because it's the kind of thing that when you go through it, and it's been 25 years now, 25 fucking years. And one school shooting happens, another, and then you're like, well, fuck, this should never happen again. And everyone's like, God, what can we do to stop it? And then eventually people just start asking what they can do to stop it because it happens every other day, every week. And then at some point, your life, my life, goes from every time a school shooting happens, you get called by the news to come talk or to go visit, to the point where people just don't call anymore because they just don't give a shit. They don't move on to other people calling. They don't call anyone. They don't care. It's done. There's no one. It's done. Horrifying.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting, and I'm sorry about that. And I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful, and I appreciate
the 17-year-old that the world made fun of for saying "I love you." That's my dad. Just to put it in context, having empathy about his son at this point.
What Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of...
I have to share a moment of my life. I went to Congress a few times. I did the lobbying thing trying to get the gun show loophole closed. Gun show loophole was this thing that's wild where in the entire country there was waiting periods and laws about gun sales, except with one exception. Gun shows. You can sell a fucking gun. I can sell you a gun. You can sell me a gun as long as it's done there and it doesn't matter. Which is insane. And it's where the shooters at Columbine, but also other school shooters got their guns because you can totally just buy them. No one gives a fuck. So I'm go to Congress and I'm doing that. This was the first time. The second, third time I went, ended up with, met a lot of Congress people. This was weird. Like Senator Byrd at the time, which was genuinely a weird experience for me. But one really, a moment stuck with me. We were part of this sort of gun show loophole, anti-gun sort of gun rights, gun law thing. It was like a group of us, and it was all over. There was a bunch of us, white guys, white kids from suburbia. And then there were dads and kids from the inner city, and very different types of reasons for being there, but ultimately towards the same end, closing loopholes, making sure guns are taken care of, getting them off the streets, making places safer. And ended up at a table with these three dads from, I think, Chicago. And they were very upfront about racial issues. This was early in my education about these things and like dealing with it. And it was a lot emotionally. But surreal moment. So John McCain comes in. Fucking weird moment, like I said. John McCain comes in and he's talking and he's doing very much the political lip service thing. There's no cameras there. This is pre-internet. No one has a camera on their phones. 2001, 2, maybe 2000. I'm trying to, like, this was early. Yeah, this was 2000. This was when we were doing Bowling for Columbine. So yeah, this was before that. And John McCain comes in and he's doing his thing, and he's saying his thing, and it's like, yeah, political. One of those dads like gets up and in this deep fucking crazy voice, it was amazing, goes like, hey, why are you only giving a shit now that white kids are dying? It was like, oh, like it almost knocked me to the ground. Like to just say that shit, speak to power like that was just wild for me. And John McCain looked at me and said, you know why? That's how this country works. I was like, what? He goes, we can work together on this and we can try to solve it now, or we can go back to dividing on this. It was a weird response. It was a surreal moment for me because it was kind of like bluntly, cynically honest. And the dad was like not angry about it. Like it was very surreal, the entire thing. That nothing came of it in the end. It's a very long story. I'll tell sometime about how I ended up getting kicked out of that group. 3 of us got sent back because it's a long story. Not anything bad. It was really good, but we were agitators, you might say. We were inspired. He was inspiring. It was genuinely an amazing dude to be around. But that thing was this weird moment of seeing like, this is the chance to get it done. Here is where the power can be. Here's how you move it. Like since then, and it's what shared for me, like the reason we started doing what we're doing is like, now we're going to start asking and being blunt about, can we get this done? Are you actually going to fucking do anything to Congress people's faces? It was a few of us that were very much fucking around, and we kind of took it a little far. We were 20. It was a whole thing. But that experience was like this weird thing of realizing when we start talking about how you move things politically. John McCain, I think, put it best then. Do you want to get this done now or not? And it was a very blunt, simple way of talking about it. And it was, I think, to me, an explanation of how politics operates. We have an idealized view. Why is this happening? Why are we caring now? Well, we're caring now. Can we move? Can we do it? Because there's pressure, there's force. We need to use it when we can. And when it passes, and it passes, it does pass. And it passes so much faster now than it ever did. It passed really fast back then. But as soon as it passes, and at the time, there's not a new school shooting in the news. That's kind of where things fizzled. They moved on. There was a sniper attacks in DC followed that, and that was a whole different type of shooting, and no one was talking about banning guns for that for some fucking reason. That push, I think, is where it feels like a relevant story to tell, but it's again why what Waltz is saying versus what Vance is saying. This is where you start talking about how we actually get things done and where the political will comes from. And I think Americans feel, and it's one of the things I talk about often, it's one of the things I hate about both the right and the left as we speak the popular cultures. They're about neutering, they're about losing your desire, about this weird castration. We can't do anything, so at least I can do something this way or that way. And the reality is, have a will and begin enacting. It's what happened in Australia in response to this massive shooting, massive tragedy, horrifying. There was a groundswell that pushed and pushed. It didn't happen the next day. It was a groundswell and a push and a push. And when there's force and when there's push, we can make things happen. It takes a lot more to happen nationally, but push locally, push at the state level, push at the city level. You can change these things, and it just goes from there. It's again, J.D. Vance didn't really experience local politics. Waltz has. And so I think there's a lot of experiences in informing on that side. Just my thoughts.
Of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is, talking about cities and where it's at, the number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
I fucking love Waltz. I just love how he talks about it. The move and the switch from this is the solution to we can work on these things. We can do this. It's fantastic. And no, Duck Canuck, you're spot on. The idea of school security is flawed in basically all the ways that security always is. It's a thing that is done as window dressing. It's done to make, as the comment goes, it's white suburban people feel safer because everyone else doesn't get it. They don't even put them in inner city school. And if they do, they're broken metal detectors, or the guard that's doing it kind of doesn't care or know how to use it. People just walk, like the level you have to go to is either an extreme form of dehumanization where kids have clear backpacks. They have to all have the same exact clothes, that like weird levels of security, and the doors are locked. You can't get out. No one can move. No one can go anywhere. And I understand the necessity of that in some ways, but it's horrifying as an existence that is the direction that Vance seems to want to go to. I think speaks volumes about where Vance is at and how Vance sort of thinks of this. But on top of that, as someone who is supposedly a poor guy from Appalachia, which he's already mentioned in this debate, the idea that the government would ever spend money on any of that shit for a rural school is fucking nuts. It's fucking nuts. I tried to put together, a few years ago, I got a chance, I started touring and doing police training. I wanted to see how police are trained. This was sort of leading up to what happened with everything, but I wanted to really get a feel for, this was prior, like there was already cop shootings, but I have a general belief that it's not just that cops are pure evil people. I believe they're cops, and their position and the material conditions of everything produces a type of resistance and style of dealing with people that is informed. But there's a lot of parts to that. And one of the things I thought about was training. So I went through and I did training in a lot of different areas. And one of the things that I found fascinating, I went to One Police Plaza in LA, and they took me through, and it was kind of amazing in a couple ways. One, it was a bunch of rooms, and the sergeant who took me through, she was lovely, very nice about it. And they kind of laughed because I was very good at the gun part, too many video games in real life and all that stuff. And that thing that they do for training is really expensive. It costs a fortune for them to do this. And that's One Police Plaza in LA, in one of the richest areas in the world and best budgeted. Everywhere else, it's fuck all. They don't do anything because they don't have the fucking money, because they have to have so many people there to have the money to have this kind of training. But even then, the training can't be kept up because they don't have enough money to do that, because the money goes elsewhere. So you end up in this really weird thing where they'll spend a little bit in one place. Everyone else will pay to travel there. That's a Cop City in Georgia isn't just meant to be like for one police department, right? That's not how it works. Instead, it's for a lot of cops to come to Cop City. That's the goal, is they want everyone to come there and train. There's the lie. They can't afford to. If they can afford to, they kind of don't need to. It's one of those really awful things, is the places that need the training, that need this, won't get it. It's systemic problems across the board. What I'm describing here is not just with cops. This is everything. The way teachers are paid, the way where I'm at. I'm outside of Portland. Where I'm at, the schools are actually maybe in the red next year, which is horrifying at a county level. It's a genuinely horrifying thing to have to sort of live with. The way that that's about to happen to all the schools here are just going to be completely fucked. Yet the schools in the city, in Portland, they're underfunded, but they're paid very well. They don't fund those external things. This won't happen across the board. They're not going to fund the schools nearby. The schools nearby can barely afford to have special education teachers. It's one of the things they're debating on axing. And it's one of the things they're proud of here. They have a school for the deaf. It's a whole thing, but they may have to axe that from the budget. The idea that they would spend more than that on security for every single school is absolutely fucking insane. It's everything. These are platitudes for a pseudo middle class that doesn't really exist. There's no such thing. It's trying to say, no, we'll take care of you, whatever you are. I don't really care because we're not going to fucking do it, is kind of what he's doing here. And it's really horrific. It's really, it's a thing they've always done, but it's a thing that every time I see it, it just feels like a punch.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. First, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the
That's the closest anyone has ever gotten in American politics to my position and where I want to be. Has anyone ever heard anyone refer to the problem with the housing market is there are people who see housing as a commodity? Did I have a stroke? Is that what someone who's going to possibly be VP just said? I know his position's not going to be where I want to be, but I'm going to glow in that moment. Just enjoy that moment because he's right. He's completely right that the commodification of the housing market is the problem. That's fucking hilarious. It feels good. That feels good. This is why I like Walz. And like the idea on a VP stage on national television during a debate, someone says that is fucking, that's fire. So we're going to rewind a second and enjoy it again. Sorry. I also want to hear how she phrased this fucking weird ass question.
The $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise.
No, stealth radical syndicalist Walz. Walz has a lot of stealth shit. Something's going, like, if you didn't read his doctoral thesis was about how we need to stop teaching only the Holocaust when it comes to genocides in schools. How we need to teach all of the genocides. That is, and his reason for it is that we should not be treating genocide as a thing that happened, but as a thing that happens, which is fucking amazing. Like, as a thing, that's amazing. So whatever he says about Israel, Palestine, all this other stuff, there's some other thing in there. And it's a really strange way to sort of talk about it and think about it. Yeah, Dark Canuck's right. There's proposals that are made in that. The thing that they're talking about, this tax credit, there is in that. And there's other things that need to be done to do it. But this is how you start the commodification of the housing market. So this is just such a weird thing to hear. I'm ready for it.
To build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No,
it's not going to do that if they handle it right. And in the proposal they've got forward and how they're looking to handle it, it seems interesting. But still.
Not handing out. First, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things is
that's like the folksiest shit I've ever heard about how to decommodify the housing market. That's the most folksy fucking thing. I've never heard Marx put more folksy. So there you go.
Said this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. we in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment.
Yep.
Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up.
And again, just to be like the capitalist asshole here, and it's the reason like I'm always confused. A lot of my positions, this is how I felt during like the vote against the Iraq War. Like, I'm not a fan of America, but the Iraq and Afghanistan war at the time, I was like, this is terrible for America. Don't do this. Everyone, it's the best thing. For Israel, I'm not a Zionist at all, but like my position is like, hey guys, stop doing what you're doing. This is going to be the end of Israel if you keep this up because it's going to go bad. Stop doing this. We need to figure out a way to have peace. No, that's over. Don't do that. And here, it's another one of those positions. It's like, if we can have more people in the housing market, here's how this works, by the way. You buy a house, however you get in there. If you can afford a house or a condo or an apartment, whatever you can, you not only have, one, the stability of having a home, which reduces anxiety, medical issues, all kinds of things, better for society overall. Like generally, overall, better for society. But on top of it, your mortgage, which you can afford because it's been helped by the government, that mortgage then can become a security that the financial sector is able to play with confidently, competently, and not lead to a crash, which is what they want to do. Let them do that. That's fine. Go do your thing. But this way you have straight up AA, AAA rated mortgages rather than what we end up with, which is people who at this point can't afford. No one's buying. So there's not a lot of market, not a lot of financialization there. Then the other side of capitalism, the part I don't think we all like, but it's part of it, isn't doing well either. Just do this. Why would this be bad? Like, this is all good for everyone. Yes, it improves people's credit, the ability to buy. I have a feeling couples who have a house or a stable home, less likely to have abortions, I would bet. So saving lives there, Republicans. Less foreclosures, less like everything, less suicides. Less mental health, less of that anxiety that's causing these postal shootings or school shootings or mass shootings. All of these things are connected. This is good for everybody. But let's see how J.D. Vance tells us that it's actually not.
Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes.
What the fuck, dude? I don't want to blame immigrants. I'm going to blame Kamala Harris for allowing the immigrants to be blamed. So keep your shit together, Kamala. Gonna fucking get you, because you're the reason I'm blaming them.
Is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas.
Of that whatsoever.
Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable.
Use the office the American people give you to cast the deciding vote in Congress, which can do everything. That's pretty sure that's the only thing she's allowed to do.
Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more.
That's genuinely someone who doesn't understand how economics work. That's genuinely how someone who doesn't understand economics works. So the new house, he's saying, is more expensive by 40% because of the cost of diesel fuel to transfer things. Then why are old houses and houses already built going up by larger numbers? Newer houses are actually cheaper than used often now. Everything's fucked. Everything's fucked. Why is that the case? Why is this happening in places that don't have large swaths of illegal immigration? There are cities that that's the case of, small cities. Why are small cities like, my favorite example is Breckenridge. I'm a Colorado kid, used to go snowboarding a lot. Used to go up in the mountains, love doing that. Breckenridge is up there. That's the kind of place that I've taken friends from Georgia and they needed oxygen tank. That city has such a housing problem that the vast majority of people who work in the shops and restaurants live in tents and cars because there's nowhere they can afford in the entire city. So there's like sections of that. Not a lot of illegal immigrants, not. So what the fuck? Amazing.
More expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have.
I want to know where this is that you can do this. So, anyone in chat, please. So, is there static? Oh, 1 second. Let me see if I can fix it. Is there, besides, I'm just here to watch a trash fire. Oh, there was a buzzing. Fascinating. Date stream. 1 second. See if this fixes it. Let me know.
Have a lot of anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Okay, so here's the plan, everyone. What we're going to do is we're going to find the remote BLM structured areas, Bureau of Land Management, to be specific, areas that are made of scrub brush and garbage no one wants to live in. We're going to build homes there, and we're going to sell them really cheap to poor people, and that'll fix things, right? Before the housing crash of 2008, a series of great articles by Yasha Levine, if you get a chance, Google Yasha Levine, was written about Victorville. Victorville is a fascinating city. In the outskirts would be like the really nice way to put it of cities in California. Bakersfield, LA, Encino, it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter. The idea was that you could build a planned suburb, like a California full-on suburb in almost the middle of nowhere that's far enough away that people will commute 2 hours or an hour into Bakersfield or other places. And this city of amazing homes, planned and built, would sell out like mad. And there was a lot of investors, tons of people built, tons of people bought, and then no one fucking lived there. And so you had this really fascinating thing start happening where now who lives there are basically immigrants, because the houses are so fucking cheap that they turned it into like an immigrant town in a fascinating way, because there was no work there. But then they were just such cheap houses that they could buy them. So they're buying them and then running smaller business on them. So there's like it's a really fascinating city. Yosh Levine did a great bunch of stuff on it, but it doesn't work to do this as a thing.
Your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants,
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity.
What the fuck is going on in our country? Like, now we have a Republican candidate also saying we need to decommodify housing. What? He went to Yale. Like, he knows what that means. He's stupid, but he was in finance. He knows what this means. Wow. Wow.
Commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are.
I kind of have to say now, I'm not a fan of the moderators because, like, they're actually talking. Like, this is, I think everyone was ready for like Trump and Kamala back and forth and Trump and all that. JD Vance, so far, they've interrupted, but it's been cordially done and back and forth, and they're asking each other questions, and I kind of wish the moderators would fuck off for a few minutes.
Are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate,
now I'm
President
buzzing.
Trump was
God
asked
damn it.
about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course.
So real quick, the stream is fascinating. The debate buzzes again after pauses, but it may be because I'm going to change how the debate is sort of streamed audio wise. So I'm going to pause it for a second and I'm going to fix the thing up and I'm going to see if I can add another audio input because this is actually really, we're going to just add another source here because I don't know why it's not sharing through whole PC. It should be doing that. Playing through. I have a setup for doing music and voice audio and all kinds of whole thing. That's through 7 and 8. So input 7, output 7 and 8. We're going to go here. Audio, output capture. 7 and 8. That's not how you type 7 or 8, Brooks. All right. And this is going to be 7 and 8. Okay.
Able to make some investments that.
Okay. Now you guys are going to be helping me say whether or not it's always interference. So OBS can capture audio a few ways. One is like the experimental where it's capturing direct. The problem is that uses excess CPU. So if there's processing being done, you'll get weird crackles once in a while. The question is, I'm going to let this play. Tell me if, because I'm not hearing crackles at all. I put it on monitor. I listened to the output. I heard it on YouTube when I turned on the YouTube thing and went, what the fuck? So I know it's accurate. I know you're not lying to me, but let me know if this is happening still.
Gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's all.
I've Googled this, and there is not a study that shows this. There's a study from 2020 that shows correlative stances between them, but his timing's really bad because it's like he didn't know this, which is fun. But the Fed literally said yesterday that the issue is actually purely a supply problem. Quote, the real issue with housing is that we have had and are on track to continue to have not enough housing, he said. In other words, it's a supply problem. He explained that it has become increasingly difficult to find and zone land in desirable locations, and all aspects of housing face challenges. Where will we get supply, he asked. Analysis by Zillow published that the housing shortage to be 4.5 million homes, which is insane as a thing. The specific cause is this. The other one saying that it has to do with immigration, migration, and its impact. It has an impact in the sense of there are more people, but there are always more people because people make people. That's how that goes. If the huge number of the homes are not lived in, huge number of the homes are rentals, huge number of the homes are like the ability for us to sell. If a home is rented, that is not part of the stock. That's not the setup for it. The shortage becomes another house. If a house is an Airbnb, the house is sat in and not lived in. It's shortage because it's not part of that setup. It's really weird. And yes, rich people don't like low-income housing. They don't like having cheaper homes nearby because it fucks their setup and their wealth. The ability for them to pretend that they could have all the money.
Also, the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance.
It's crackling again. Oh, my God. I just fucking hate this. Now I'm crackling? I fucking hate all of this. What the fuck? All right, we're going to try a thing. I'm going to try another thing. Give me a second. Try another thing. Now I'm buzzing. Now I'm good. Fucking goddamn it. Just hold on. Just hold on. I'm going to blame it on the number of people watching because that is straining my computer. Even though that's not how any of this works, I'm going to pretend to blame it on that. Is this any better in theory at all? I'm not hearing crackling, but I'm also, I mean, I shouldn't be. I'm trying to figure out how to get it on my side. But it's setting up particularly. I'm just trying to see why can't I, what the fuck? It's very, very frustrating. Very frustrating indeed. And I'm not crackling. Okay. I'm not crackling on my side at all. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'll be hearing it. So if it's happening on my side, otherwise it's YouTube stream, something weird with that. I need to check my connections maybe.
Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's
under Donald Trump's leadership. Just like, think about that and the timing of that and what that means in anything, because that's wild. I'm glad his people got fucking medical care, but
it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%.
Now it's all crackling. Fucking what the fuck? What's going on? We're going to return in
Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into American consumers a little bit more choice, and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, you know, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
But he didn't. And that's the thing, is he didn't. He did nothing the first time. He was supposed to replace Obamacare wholly. That was the idea from the ground up. That's what he kept saying. He's going to replace it. He had a better system. Now he has a concept of one. He's never done anything. It's an extraordinarily, yes, a bald-faced lie, like straight up, simply lying. It's stunning. Like when that happens, it's just amazing.
Old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids.
Dark Canuck says, are the voters informed enough to know this, though? That's my fear. I'm in Canada. I know more than a lot of Americans I've spoke with are not that informed. There's enough information that I think that people, here's the thing, his base doesn't care. That's the thing. And I'll say again what I always say. This debate is not about none of these debates. No election in America for 20, 30, 40 years has really been about convincing people to your side or changing minds. It's a question of, are you able to invigorate your base and invigorate a larger number of people to vote for you while depressing your opposition? That's what you want to do. It's why you'll see a lot of both sides sending notes all the time. Hey, polls can be wrong, or we're winning, but oh my God, Kamala's pulling ahead here, or oh my God, Trump is pulling ahead here, or the pollsters, I think they sent out a big thing that Nate Silver is wrong often, because what they don't want is people to become complacent. That's the biggest way to lose, is if your voter base believes they have no need to vote. It's one of the things Hillary did genuinely wrong, is she acted like it was silly to worry about Trump, that he's obviously not going to win, that he's so broken and insane. That mentality depressed vote for her, amongst other things. Terrible campaigner. But this is how elections work. So it's not, oh, am I going to convince J.D. Vance's people this, or I don't know. It's J.D. Vance is saying what he's saying. I don't believe it resonates at all with Trumpsters. I don't think they give a fuck at all. I think he seems like the smart guy, and they like that, whatever. They don't like Tim Walz because they I mean, they're horrible people. It's a lot of the reason, I hate to say, but it's just, they don't like Tim Walz because they suck. Tim Walz is doing the thing he's doing to invigorate his base, and the invigorating of the base to go, you're going to have healthcare. We can do this. We're going to do more. We're going to do X. We're going to do Y. We're going to do Z. This is what Walz is doing, and it's deeply effective. The way that the right has treated Walz, I think, is speaks volumes of them, honestly.
Get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Thank God for Obamacare.
We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. Yes. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership.
It's an extraordinary lie. And it's, again, McCain's vote stopped him from destroying the program, so now he can take credit for changing it. That thing, basically, he didn't get his way, and the way he was forced to deal with it, in many opinions, made it worse, but made adjustments to it that some people were fine with, and that's how it goes.
He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is... So you
think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you.
It's spot on. It's the hard truth about insurance. You need a wide pool in order to make it viable.
Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time.
Ahead,
we have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who's an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and...
We should not do this. Choice here is the lie, and it's the lie that the capitalist class likes to use here. The choice shouldn't be allowed because anytime you allow choice, you allow social pressure to make that choice. The idea of choice we really like because it makes us think that we should be allowed to pick what works best for us. But that's not how it works. How it works is if you've ever worked at a company, by the way, that has unlimited vacation. I've worked at a few of those. You can take vacation anytime you want, but don't take too much because we don't want that. If a woman is in the position of taking 5 days or choosing 2 weeks or choosing 6 weeks or choosing 9 months, the best solution for everyone is 9 months. Just letting you know. The best solution for everyone is that child has parents there, someone there taking care of it, feeding it, being with it in every way. That playbook, 100% spilled drink, the playbook of, well, we want to give you the choice. If you have the option of 5 days, your work will let you know you should take the 5 fucking days because we need you back in 2 weeks. And if you take longer than that, there's a stigma. There's a problem. You are a lazy fuck if you do that. If you take all of the paid time off that they give you, you're a lazy fuck. Even though these are things that are afforded you, not only in your work contract, but legally required and oftentimes. The reason you require that minimum, the reason they do in Sweden, as an example, I worked for Starbreeze, a Swedish company. The reason they require the time off, it is not a fucking option. people still kind of work a little bit from home. They still do that stuff if their job is a little softer, is because you want culturally to enforce the idea that a parent should be with their kids, that you should enforce the idea that a parent should be taking care of their kids. You should make it so it's a choice. And by a choice, it means do the thing that's actually best for everybody. There is no place on earth, I'm sorry to say, I can't think of one. You're free to give me an example of a mother going, 5 days is enough. It's time for me to head back to work and for my 6-day-old child to be at daycare. Please feel free to tell me how that works with it for anyone. It doesn't. The choice is the problem because the pressure is already there to work extensively. This is it's very common. It's a thing that people are aware of. This is horrifying. So anytime they have this, it's one of those things that's like, Jesus Christ.
But Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care, because look, it is unacceptable. And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on.
There's no one on earth who's upset about the choice. That's not like, it's just such a disingenuous way to say it. There is no one who's like, boy, God, I'd love to go to work tomorrow, but I'm paid to stay home with my kids. God damn, who's making me do this? Oh God. That's not, hey, I hate that I'm being forced to make a choice between staying home with my kid and taking care of him after he's born or she's born, staying home and taking care and bonding over the course of months, or being forced to return to work because I'm not allowed to and I'm not paid, and my work will fire me because it's legally allowed for them to fire me for taking off an excessive amount of time, even though pregnancy is not drastic. Like, giving birth is like being hit by a fucking car physically. So, like, it's insane that this is the setup. So it's bullshit as a thing. It's Jordan, in the history of corporate America, expecting mothers were expected to give up their jobs permanently as policy. My mom gave up her career because she became pregnant. That's the way it works. It's the way it worked. It's done. It's fucking done. It's over. So it's not alone in that. This is how it goes. You're meant to be done. So for him, what he's saying about choice is either decide never to work again or work. And again, the conservative, shitty mindset. Thank you, some of you are welcome. The setup here is horrifying. And again, it's not about choice. Starbreeze had this infinite vacation thing. You could take all the vacation you wanted. There is no rules. There was no limit. Do you know how much vacation time I took? Or most people took? 0. In Sweden, they had months off, required by law. Not allowed, required by law. And everyone took their time off. Americans, we didn't. And I was a fucking global director. I was very senior. I could have, in theory, had the pressure to do that. I could have, in theory, done this. But that's not how it works, because I'm in charge. I have to be setting a tone. The social pressure, the corporate pressure, the setup, I needed to be there because people were dependent on me. But I'm not. Oh, and some of you are very nice. Thank you very much for donating 10 memberships. I have so many members today. It's very nice. You're very kind. And to just follow that up, since there's more of you than I've ever had on this stream, if you like what I do, this is not normally what I do. I kind of do a little bit. It's the discussion around sort of the actual pressures, social pressures, meaning of things. But the Quarantine Collective is focused on specifically the works generally around Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, and we do readings of philosophy all the time and discussions around how philosophy impacts our lives practically, where it touches and how, which I'm trying to bring into these things. So if you like what I'm doing, please do join. Membership's lovely. If you go to patreon.com/DGQC, also works very great. We don't really have a lot there, but you can also, pay a couple extra bucks, force me to review a book. I've got a big list of books over there, whole bunch of fun stuff you can do, or join the Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. We're reviewing a whole bunch of stuff. And the YouTube is being played. I have a really fancy little filter. Yes, so I'm forcing it to be seen in a CRT TV because I didn't want to just leave it up like that. So I just thought it'd be fun, and it gives me a visual flair. So there you go. Thank you, Insomnia. You are loved. Off we go.
On American families, we're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump...
I have two kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. We don't have a lot of money right now. I've been fortunate to have good jobs in the past, but they're just jobs, certainly not wealthy, on the road to being broke, all that fun stuff. The way that child care works is genuinely fucking criminal. For anyone who doesn't have it, you need to understand the reason it affects you is because the people you're going to be talking to in 15 years are the ones who are in this system right now. Like, this is how we take care of the next generation. It is so expensive to have childcare. We do not do it. My wife and I both, we're doing some work from home. I'm doing some consulting from home. This is the best we can do because childcare for 2 or 3 of them would be $2,500 to $3,000 a month to start. So, and our rent is only slightly more than that. So the setup that happens in this country for people, and I like to think we're decently off. We're not. We're like, hand to mouth, but I'm not 2 paychecks out like most Americans. I don't know how people are doing this. I don't know how it functions. And it's because it's not. Most kids would do this. Parents work themselves to death. They get their kid into childcare, and then school is the childcare. But we don't fund school. And so kids aren't really taken care of the way they need to be there because we have teachers who are there are either people who don't give a shit or people who are there for passion, and neither of them are taken care of. So we are raising a nightmare generation, and it's a horrifying time. Childcare is so important, and incredibly important to really the future of everything, let alone this country. But again, if they cared about abortion, they'd be like, hey, free childcare. Another cost you don't have to worry about, by the way, which would be lovely. Free family medical leave. We'll take care of it for you. We'll take care of all your medical bills around it too. When my wife and I had insurance at the time for my son. My first son was $36,000 was the bill for insurance. Thank God for my son being born. So think of that. 36,000 US. That's a fucking car brand new, a decent car brand new. My daughter was slightly cheaper, born in a different area, but that's the setup. We had insurance. So that is insane. That's insane. It's insane.
Recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers.
So, and here's where he gets me on some things. Like, I'm not a big isolationist. The way tariffs function is effectively a sales tax on consumers. They're positioning it that they're charging companies this. They don't understand that that's not how it works. When Nike builds stuff overseas, they bring it here, the shoes will be 20% more expensive. The U.S. will get that 20%, but all have paid that because there's no way Nike's just going to eat that cost. They're going to pass that on to me. It'll make everything more expensive that's made overseas. They believe this will force jobs to come back to the U.S. That's not how it works. You can't just have that happen here. There's a billion reasons why we're fucked on that, and it's because we've been basically 30 plus years of NAFTA and other things. So we're not going to have manufacturing become a big thing here again. That's just not how it works. But the other side, and it's where they keep saying this, and it's the thing that annoys me that someone isn't picking up, there is an extraordinary amount of labor brutality happening in other countries that is part of this capitalist system that we're in. It's not every country. There are countries that are lovely that we import stuff from. Generally, Taiwan, not awful. China, as much as people may shit on it, it's not as bad as others. There's slave labor in some places, this and that. There's exploitation of workers is a pretty much global thing. It happens in LA. Like, workers are exploited in LA. There's child labor in Alabama. Like, all of these things are happening. So I'm not like trying to essentialize it, but the idea that we would actually put tariffs on countries that have shitty labor practices, I would need someone to really spend time with me to work me out of that being a good idea. Because that seems off the cuff. Like, yeah, like make people who want slave labor shit pay a fuck ton more. Those jobs can be moved to a different manufacturing base. That makes more sense to me, but it's a complex problem. Sorry for the ramble.
Workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Which they don't have in any of their plans and they've not put together. But the phrase he used there that's important, and I find it fascinating, actually. It's a really interesting, specific thing. Through job growth. So he's saying that it's not the tariffs that are going to be bringing it in, that the economic growth, because we'll be bringing manufacturing jobs back, which would take it would take a decade if it happened, which I don't believe it would. That's broken. That's not a thing. That's not a thing at all. That's not a thing at all. That's very weird.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator.
Jimbo's like, Googling it. Without insurance, average hospital bill for a regular birth is $30,000. My son was born at Cedars-Sinai, which is in Beverly Hills. We didn't live there, but it's the nicest hospital around. It was a 5-minute drive from where we happened to be, and so that's how it goes. It was only $5,000 more, so $6,000 more, 36, I think, 35, 36. It's expensive as shit. It was 29 or 30, I think, here, and we're an hour outside Portland. So it's like the hospital was an hour and a half outside Portland. So we're a ways out. It's a lot here. JD Vance, though, it's again, fascinating. Just said, and I think it's important as a thing, that we need to pay for childcare for people, like with taxes, that people have to be comfortable with that. I didn't expect him to say that. This is a position I did not expect for him to have. Waltz, I expected, but didn't expect for JD Vance. So that's a weird thing that Trump is going to have to pay for in the next few days. So be watching for someone bringing that up with Trump, that, you're going to pay for it with further revenues from taxes. The government and other people will be paying for other people's childcare, including, by the way, black people's and poor people's childcare. I can't wait for how Elon Musk and Twitter will handle that.
Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting.
Just real quick, Dark Canuck. Dark Canuck mentioned it, hit by a moose, had a horrifying thing in Canada, cost $10 for 2 slings, and everything else was taken care of. Wonderful. By the way, moose are horrifying monsters when you see them in person. They're wonderful, but it's like terrifying. If you lived in the States, you might as well have left him in the ditch with the moose. We'd have lost everything. There are people who make that choice in America, not as a joke, but as back before all of this, there were people who couldn't make that choice. Before Obamacare, let's talk about being an old man. Before Obamacare, and the before times in the long, long ago, people who got injured, who didn't have insurance, couldn't get insurance. That's how it used to be. It's not the case anymore. Now, if you are in a car accident, you can actually get insurance the next day, and it's a very different beast. Pre-existing conditions don't work here that way. Thank God. They used to. People I know, a guy I know got brain cancer and didn't have insurance. And that was it. Because you can't afford chemo unless you're wealthy. Like, that was it. So this thing that happened, that was Obamacare, changed positively. We've got a long way to go, but yeah, Jesus Christ.
Testing the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policy.
He's a coward. Look, believe what you believe. We know what it is. We know what you believe, JD. We know what you believe. Just say it. It's one of the things, like, at least I appreciate Trump for is, like, he's not like lying about it. And he's not like, no, the election was totally above board. Everything was great. I don't know what you're talking about, like, which he could. And by the way, it would be fine. He's just, yeah, no, it's fucking terrible what they did to me. I got screwed. If this happens again, blah, blah, blah. Like, just say the thing. Just say the thing, dude. Like, your base loves you for it. Don't sidestep like a coward. Like, what a weirdo, man. Like, this is your thing. You're a fucking rich person who believes this shit, going for the highest office in the land of someone who says this shit all the time. Don't be a coward, man.
That have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud.
In the history of America, let's just go back. Whether or not you're a free speech absolutist or not, there is a reality to free speech laws in the U.S. and what they were used for and how they were done and what they were taken up with. The way that these things worked, we have not been a free speech absolute country by any stretch of the imagination. It's continually been something that has been curtailed and fucked with and changed all the time. Sedition was a thing. We executed a handful of anarchists because of their beliefs, because we claimed they were around for a thing. Like, we did awful shit. This country has been a history of doing that. That ain't going to be what kills democracy. Just letting you know, that ain't going to be it. That's not the thing. That's not the thing that'll kill America. That's not the setup here. That's not how it works. The idea that people should be able to say anything and lie and buy platforms and lie and spread genuine, outright disinformation that they're aware is a lie, that thing isn't actually legal in America and has not been legal. We somehow think the internet doesn't work like the rest of news media. I don't know why we do this and why we pretend like this, but it doesn't. You can't lie on the news, just so you know. If you didn't know, you can't. Those are broadcast waves that are given to people and their licenses that the government allows. And there are laws about how news organizations need to treat themselves and treat others. There are a lot of them. The idea that these platforms that are not really public squares any longer, X doesn't get to pretend that it is what it once was. Facebook gets to pretend a little bit. This idea as a thing, bullshit. It's complete bullshit. And it's a thing that has not stifled speech and will continue to not stifle speech. It's bullshit. It's straight up bullshit.
Especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me.
Tulsi Gabbard and RFK have never been leaders in the Democratic coalition in any capacity. Tulsi was a sort of weird reaction populist vote out of Hawaii, who rose quickly because she's a slightly attractive woman who very specifically spoke out against big business and other things like that. Turns out she's on the genocidal side of the worst regime that we've had in India in history. Horrifying human being, plus other things. She sucks. The other side is RFK, who I don't even know where to start with that. A worm ate his brain. And he claimed this in a divorce so he could get away with it, who had actively during this campaign a sexual relationship with a reporter from the New Yorker that he claims she forced him to receive pictures of her. If you didn't, he's just fucking out of his mind. Yes, he is just nuts. He's a fucking lunatic, and it's really pathetic. It's really pathetic. And the things he believes are insane. He's never been a leader of the Democratic Party. It's a lie. So these are not leadership in the left. Neither of them have ever been left. It's not leadership in the Democratic Party. It's just untrue. That they're on the side of Trump proves they were never in that position, to say the least.
Me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues.
No, it's and Sam Cedar with RFK Jr. Sam Cedar put it the best. The proof of his hypocrisy is in what happened. The number one thing he's been screaming about with vaccines and everything, and he's an anti-vaxxer, he's a piece of shit across the board, but he's been yelling a lot about, oh my God, there's this corporate capture of all these agencies because they do transactions where they agree to do X, Y, and Z for a transaction. And it's ridiculous because they do this for some future benefit. That should be illegal. Well, my campaign's failing. Hey, I'm going to do a transactional relationship with Donald Trump. He's going to give me my cabinet thing and I'll give him an endorsement, which is the thing he's bitching about. So what the fuck is he going to do if he's willing to do the thing he's hateful of and that he wants to change? That's the thing. That's the thing. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care. He just doesn't care. He doesn't actually care about it. It's not really the thing. What he cares about is this pseudo corruption for him to just get his way so he's an autocrat. That's what he's done. That's how he's talked. That's what he's done. It's the way it works. He's a piece of shit. Sorry, it's my parents are huge RFK fans, and it fucking makes me lose my mind.
And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Yes, that's the quote.
I've enjoyed tonight's debate. And I
JD.
think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest.
Mabel hit it on the head. It's what I always say to my 6-year-old too. Hey, the end of the game, shake hands. Don't cause an insurrection where you shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk.
About it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
I would.
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands.
After the insurrection failed, 2 weeks later, he peacefully gave up power. I don't think that's going to ring as loudly as he wants. Because, I mean, it's technically true. He peacefully gave up power involuntarily. Like, and then proceeded to say that he shouldn't have for 4 years. I love it.
And Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we...
It's a it's a little bit more than just the ads, although the ads are kind of a big deal. Like and again, I don't even say that's on, I don't, a lot of the dossier shit, I think some of it was overblown, but the idea that a foreign government was interfering absolutely did. It's what foreign governments do, and it's a thing to be aware of. I think Hillary lost the election fair and square because she sucks in every single way. She sucks. She sucked as a candidate. She's the worst possible candidate. This is the Norm Macdonald joke. I will always say forever. People hate Hillary so much that they're willing to vote for someone they hate more. It's a fucking exactly perfect way to describe it. But to just rewind a little bit, in case he's about to mention it or he doesn't, in 2000, there was a big issue in Florida with counting votes. And a bunch of Republicans, because they didn't want the Democratic areas to finish their vote counts. And there were issues with it. And they knew it was going to be close. So a bunch of Republicans, I'll get to who it was because it's the important part. It's this one specific guy who probably fucked Laura Loomer. Potentially, but I believe is the case, I think, as people understand it, just to say. Roger Stone led the Brooks Brothers riots. They call it that because there was a bunch of shitheads in Brooks Brothers outfits that looked like they were out of Brooks Brothers because they looked like Wall Street dickheads who stormed and threw a bunch of shit around and did riots. They did bad shit. And this event caused an upheaval that went to the Supreme Court in a lawsuit that ultimately delayed the count long enough for the Supreme Court to say, actually, we're going to stop the count now. We're okay with the results as they are. Yet Gore would have won if they kept voting. The voting was 100% along party lines. That election was flatly stolen from Al Gore. Not a slight thing, totally stolen. And Roger Stone was behind that, intricately involved in that. He is a rat fucker supreme. That's a thing. Now, here we have January 6th, and look who's hanging out. It's Roger Stone hanging out with the Proud Boys. Weird. I wonder if it's the same kind of people wanting to do the same kind of thing after trying to do it many times. Odd, right? Just odd.
We want to say that we need to respect the results of the election. I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think
does that too.
Everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen.
And a puff him in on, a lot of people don't know that Roger Stone was around for that. He by the way, he looks the same. And that's not a compliment to his youth because it didn't look young. But 100%, if you go back and you watch footage, he's one of the orchestrators of the Brooks Brothers. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy that it's the same fucking guy who's now in part of this. And he's a fucking rat fucker. That's what he's done every fucking election. It's incredible. Roger Stone is insane. Like, he is like this ball of nightmares that things swarm around. Again, that's why Laura Loomer, gross, but accurate, I think. Yeah. He has a tattoo of Richard Nixon. Giant tattoo of Richard Nixon's fucking head on his back. Like, I don't think Richard Nixon was evil or anything, but that's the thing you get a tattoo of. Like, I have tattoos. I was really into Insane Clown Posse when I was younger. So you turn 18, you get a lot of dumb tattoos, a lot of good tattoos, a lot of people, tattoos of people who died, tattoos of albums you like, tattoos of random shit. I have a barcode. I have symbols on my leg, a bunch of different stuff. I have a lot of people don't know this right here. Let's see if I can get it in. You can see these dots right here. Some people think I have a flesh-eating disease or something. This is, and it's let me see if I can get it to zoom a little bit. Let's see, it's, come on, right there. Yeah, this is tattoos. This isn't like skin marks. What it is when my son was born, I cut his umbilical cord and the blood spattered. I took a photo of it, went to a tattoo artist and had him replicate it. So it's never forget that thing. So tattoos are great. I'm a fan of getting tattoos of all sorts. Richard Nixon in the square of your back is fucking insane to me. It's insane to me as a thing. That's one of the craziest fucking things I think that exists. If you haven't seen it, one sec. It's not even a good tattoo. It's a fucking weird tattoo. It's so fucking weird. This guy is such a fucking weirdo. Let's see. Here it is. And we go here. Go whoop. There you go. The internet has everything, I think, is the short version. It's too much. It's too much. The internet has everything. There's Roger Stone's tattoo. What the fuck? Like, it's not even stylized. Like, it's not even, like, interesting. It's fascinating to me. I find Roger Stone fucking fascinating. I really do. I find it's fucking weird to me. It's a busted fuck tattoo. It's not even good. It's poorly done in ways. And he's rich because he's connected to all these people. It's so fucking weird to me. It's, when I worked for James Cameron, one of the things that always surprised me, Jim had race cars. One of the things he did is he collected really, really expensive cars. Do you know what he drove to work most often? It's like this beat up old Jeep Cherokee from like 1989 that he had like retrofitted with an electric engine. It's like the shittiest car that's ever existed. It'd be parked in Jim's spot, almost got towed a couple of times. People are strange and they carry a lot of stuff with them. That tattoo, that's too much for me. That is a mental condition. Something's in there. It's a little bit more that, and it is, as far as I know, it's his only fucking tattoo. Yes. He doesn't have any other on his body, on his back. I mean, I haven't seen everything. You'd have to write Laura Loomer and ask, but as far as I know, it is his only tattoo. It's the only one on his back or his arms. And unless he has one like on his chest, that's, as far as I'm aware, that's it. And his body, it's not even a healthy look. Like, just again, this fucking weird dude. Like, it's not a good look, dude. Like, it's not, I don't know. Roger Stone, I get fascinated by because he's in everything. He's in all these horrifying moments and no one cares or knows. They know he's around, but he's this king of the rat fucks. It's just weird to me. He might have Reagan on his ass. Fair. I don't know. I'll start writing Laura Loomer and asking. It'll make Trump jealous.
And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020.
Because of Donald Trump's inability to say.
Christ.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
No, she didn't at all. She really didn't. Like, absolutely not, by the way, at all.
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come
again, this is like the underlying thing. Like Vance being bad at this, Trump is bad at this. People are bad at this. It's fine. But he's bad at it in a way that isn't, and I'm going to use terms here. I'm into the psychoanalysis thing. Deal with it. This is not arousing. He is not arousing. And I will say Tim Walz is. I don't mean in the, like, everyone here, relax for a second. This is not me saying he's arousing sexually, although I kind of do mean that. What I mean is like inspiring, impassioning, arousing. Walz, when he says stuff, it's making me animated. It's making people animated. It's, there is no arousing from J.D. Vance. This wasn't even an arousing answer for someone who agrees with him. This isn't even an arousing answer. I think it's terrible that you haven't answered. It's like, no, like say, I think there are lots of issues and I think it's disgusting that you won't allow us to discuss it. If that's how we want, that's what he thought he did. That was the thing he thought he said. He's not that bright. He's not that good. He's not good at this. The rhetoric should have been, you want me to talk about January 6th? Why don't you talk about all the things you're stopping? Blah, blah, blah. Like just something that's a little bit more, instead of like this dot. It's awful. His mystic, yes, Vance's flaccidity personified. Not a bad way to put it. He is a big rubbery one. That's what he is as a thing.
Together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Sorry.
Kick people off Facebook for saying toddlers shouldn't wear masks, where nowhere was toddlers asked to wear masks. I had toddlers, so I know this. Fascinating. What an odd response.
Fire in a crowded theater, that is criticizing the policies of the government, which is people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater, that is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Wait. These are like the worst moderators that have ever existed. Right? Like that is the weirdest exchange. Okay. They said, I'm going to rewind it and say it again, but watch, because they said, Senator, please, it's the governor's turn, which would mean, to say another way, shut up, Vance. Walz has the floor. And instead, Vance keeps talking and Walz says, I'm sorry. That's how shitty they are at their job.
Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Senator, the governor does have the floor. And watch the governor apologize.
Sorry. Fire in a crowded theater, that is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News.
I am fascinated with this. We're just going to fast forward through all of this crap. Oh, that's a fascinating time to have.
This mornings, weekdays at 7.
We're going to watch this ad. So.
It didn't seem like anything could happen because nothing ever happens in East Palestine.
Do you know where Vance is senator from? It's Ohio.
But it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Genuinely, we left the city to die. Like, we left this entire town to just fucking die. Just be aware of that. That's a thing that we did. And we've done a couple times, actually, since, as far as I understand. But this one, we just left this city and all the people in it to suffer. It's great. We did this. Who's the senator? Is he on stage right now? Weird timing.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing and bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
Yeah.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
Jesus fucking
case.
Christ.
It's like a screenplay, something straight.
That's going to be a thing to watch. It's a lot of things. I'm glad they're still doing stuff on it because, man, we forgot about that shit, didn't we? Just keep moving on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. Fuck. That was a lot. So when we talk about choice, when Vance talks about choice, that's the situation you get put in when you have choice, when the government gives options, when it doesn't just do the damn thing that needs to get fucking done. The railway infrastructure in the country, the way it works, all those companies have choices to do what they've done. Oh, yeah, they do. They're doing the minimum sometimes. Not all the time. Usually not even. But hey, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? It's the way it works. Fuck. Canuck asks, who's winning? So, as always, I actually think this is just in concert with the general thrust of what I'm seeing is that the excitement and building for there is more for Kamala and for Walz. There's more push there. There's more activity there. It's what I'm seeing. I have a fake conservative Facebook account that's in a bunch of groups, and it's a very different mentality and space, and it's shrinking, and the way people are talking to each other, and it's very different. The debate itself, I think Walz at this point is coming out on top. He's much more clear. He's right at the issues. He's doing the thing that is important, which is answering the questions in a way that people at home will care about. He's addressed people at home multiple times. He did it before Vance did, and he's done it more often than Vance. His responses are pointed and specific, and he's deeply emotional. Vance has one look. Vance doesn't exist. He's is a Christian Bale in American Psycho kind of guy. He doesn't have that going on. Walz has emotions, and he's responsive, and he's a thing people can invest in emotionally. He's clearly coming out ahead. Whether or not that's going to translate to things, I think it will, but I mean, he's just better at this. He's connecting with people, and I think he's connecting with people in places that normally would be a depressed Democratic voting base. That's the thing I like about him. Because I think Kamala is going to get a lot of people excited in the very traditional Democratic bases, but I think Walz is going to be able to do a lot more in the swing states than she can, genuinely. If that answered
Welcome
your
back
question.
to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. it matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, yeah,
Dick Cheney came out in support of Kamala. He's just talking about the wide swath of people. I personally would never mention Dick Cheney again. But hey, you know, they're going for a very particular weird segment of the Democratic hockey party. Fine. There's a lot of Democrats who voted for Obama who voted for Bush for 2 concurrent elections. So it's the way it works. We're a weird country. We're a fucking weird country. The guy who was apologized to by the guy who shot in the face. Yes, that's the guy. That's the guy. It's Dick Cheney is a unique human being that sadly has proven once again only the good die young.
Better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class.
Puffin Amon says, and I should post and boost, Behind the Bastards, phenomenal podcast. Robert Evans is a friend of a friend, like deeply mutual, very good friend actually, in Michael Swaim, and who keeps telling me that I need to get together and meet him. We need to introduce us because we get along. The podcast is wonderful on Yarvin. I highly suggest it. You got your rocker? Wagon. Your wagon? Oh my gosh. Wagon. Yeah. Do you want to come say hi? Or do you want to take your wagon outside? Outside it goes. Go, go, go. Fair enough. Sorry, you don't get to meet Violet. Not today. She's taking her wagon and going. She's better than all of us. Let's be fair. Right, Violet? Yep, there you go. The thing they did on Yarvin's great. Yarvin is a horrifying piece of shit. The philosophy and everything of these people in Silicon Valley is deeply focused in trendy bullshit in general, touches into a lot of the Nicklandian pseudo post-structuralist garbage that really is just fascist thought brought back. It's just fascist thought. It's not even interesting versions of fascist thought, sadly. I would love interesting fascism to tarry with. Sadly, it always ends up being the same fucking thing. Ugh.
And she's centering you at the heart of that, all the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when
you talked about energy. Fucking moron.
She didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for...
Yeah, you're terrible. We're done with you. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated by things. Vance is not very good at this. Like, he just really isn't. He's not very good at a lot from what I've garnered of his time doing a lot of things. And I'm still trying to figure out how he failed into working for Peter Thiel. Like, that's not a thing that everyone gets. It's a thing a lot of sycophantic little pieces of shit in business schools want. But what made him stand out? He wasn't connected. He wasn't set up that way. What does Thiel see in him? And is it the same thing as Trump seeing in him? I don't get it. Like, as a thing, I don't get him. It's fascinating. It's so odd. Short version of review, and then I kind of want to actually talk about J.D. Vance for a second. He finished in the same way he went the whole time, in a fairly castrated, unarousing way that's flaccid. I will just keep saying that. And he didn't do it. He's not fire. Trump, if anything can be said, he knows how to arouse an audience. He very much does. Now, granted, it's in a particular way, but he does, and it worked. I don't care who you are. During the early parts of the 2016 campaign, it was good to see. Some of it felt good. You were like, I kind of get that guy. You were. We've all been at that point where it's like, I get it. I don't hear. I don't get it. I don't know it. It makes no sense to me. Walz, I get. Walz beat the shit out of Shapiro in the personality department. He's amazing. He's charismatic, folksy, fun, smart. He talked about decommodifying the housing market, which I'm waiting for leftists to tomorrow talk about how he didn't go far enough talking about decommodifying the housing market on a national debate stage. Like, he's been a human being. You can tell he's done things. I don't know Vance, and I want to. I really kind of do, because he reminds me of a huge number of people that I've known. A lot of people. I've worked in Silicon Valley. I've worked in LA. I've worked in San Francisco. There's a very particular Midwest personality that does seem to make it at a lot of these investment firms or tech companies on the business side that are inexplicable. There's some that are explicable, where it's like, they're really quick, they're really fun to talk to. Even if I don't agree with them on everything, they're at least have a personality. But there's a lot who are like kind of bland and sitting, smiling in the corner, like just open. And I don't get it. I don't get why Peter Thiel would hire him. Peter Thiel, who also, granted, has as much of a personality as Elon Musk, who surrounds himself with a lot of different people. What makes him select them? It's so fucking weird to me. And again, it's like Yarvin. Yarvin has no personality. He's a negative personality. He's a fucking loser. Like, as much as someone can be, he's like just fucking loser. Like, hear him talk. He's nonsensical. He doesn't read. He's unlearned. He's incorrect about stuff. He talks with that weird nasally. He's that thing, but he's somehow this thing. He's successful, and it's strange, but he's a loser, and he's a weirdo in the wrong way. It's so weird. I find Vance fascinating. I really do. And I find his wife equally fascinating. I would love, once he loses or whatever, I would love to hear, like, if you could, and I know we never will get it, but I would love to know what the year, like the day they lose, if they lose, pray they lose, the day they lose, I want a real moment of honesty from her where we can go, hey, what really was that fucking like being an Indian woman, family of immigrants, running in the Republican Party during this time, and these things happening? Why did you stick around? Why did you, like, and we know the reasons kind of, but like, I would love to have a real honest moment with these people to go like, what happened? What was that really like? Why did you do this? Like deep dive that, because it's like, I know why Trump's doing it. Trump's doing it not drastically different from the reason that Bibi's doing a lot of what he's doing, because this is what he knows. This is going to keep him out of jail. Power will do this. It's the only thing he knows. He's a failure otherwise. And if he doesn't have this, he has nothing. Like, that's the setup as a thing. And it's like, so I get the Trump thing, why he, like, his drives, his pushes, his thing. I get it. It's still shitty, but I get it. But it's fascinating. And his wife, Miss Maserati, sometimes Silicon Valley bros want someone boring who won't upstage them and just go along. Agreed. But why Vance? There's a lot of those bros. Now, there's not a lot of people who are made partner at a Peter Thiel investment firm. There's not like 10,000 of those positions. There's very, very few. And he was chosen. Now, granted, someone had to be. So is it that? Is it that it wasn't even Vance? It was just, all right, fucking, I don't know, we rolled the dice. All right, that's a 20, and that's a 5. All right, there's all right, J, and then the second letter is D. Do we have any JDs in here? All right, you can work for me. If that's the setup, I buy it, because then it's just another thing. Yeah, the Ivy League white guy lottery. It's like, all right, you work for Peter Thiel. All right, you're going to go work for Musk. All right, you go. We need peons. We need peons. Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber actually goes through this very, very nicely. But it's very interesting that it would be him. Like, why him? He stands out less than a lot of these guys in a lot of ways. I find it fascinating. I don't know. I find it just odd. And he's such a terrible choice for president. Like, what the fuck? There's no one who's voting because of Vance. So why? Like, we know why he chose Pence. He chose Pence to appeal to Middle America Bible Belt voters. Pence was that guy, and he was perfect for it. And he got them out in droves. And so is Vance supposed to be that junior version or a business version of it or a pro version of it? It's like, I find it fascinating. In absolute and relative terms, there aren't a lot of alumni. This is true, Hugh. This is very true. But there's more than 3, and I can't imagine that he was the winner. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, pick any 3 out. Is JD going to, like, stand out there? It's maybe he performed better in the past. Maybe he's out of his element here. Maybe we just aren't seeing it. I find it fascinating. I find him interesting, and the choice of him interesting. Because a lot of these people, again, the thing I was talking about was Sunday, and I was going over before, thing I was actually going over even earlier today. The reality is, it's not so much that a person is picked. It's you get rid of that person, other things come in that position. We produce the society and the social order, and the person that sort of leads that is pushed into position. If you kill baby Hitler, great, you've killed a baby. But someone else, because the conditions that produced the need for someone in that spot, someone else is going to take the place. It's not that Hitler made Nazis happen. It's that the Nazis were created by this larger situation. So Trump and all of the people underneath it, the surge of that creates the need for people in very particular positions. So really fascinating to me is that setup where it's like, what is J.D. Vance's thing? Because it was before he wrote his book, it was all of that. It's a really odd thing overall. I just find it fascinating. A lot of new faces, by the way. Love having you here. Don't forget to subscribe. We do a lot of philosophy readings on here. Our difference and repetition readings Thursdays. I'm on here a bunch. We're doing Ruyere, which I really love. I do Anti-Oedipus every Tuesday for a few hours, and then later on the weekends, some random stuff. And then occasionally we do streams like this. So please join us, or just join us on our Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. We'd love to have you. Love to talk through all of these things. Because there's a lot of really great questions being asked. Let's see. Holly, what is Holly's connection to Thiel? That's actually a great question. Let's find out. Because I want to say there is one, but I'm not going to jump. Oh yeah, no, very close, actually. Jesus Christ. Thiel, he made Josh Hawley, it looks like, very similarly. Josh Hawley had a personality, though, I would say. Like, in comparison to J.D. Vance, maybe I should limit myself and be very careful. But Hawley, smarmy fuck looking guy that he is, you could hear when he talked, there was something more happening. He conveyed emotion. He did that thing. And so, like, I get more why Thiel would be attracted to him. Apparently $300,000 in his campaign from Thiel, shit like that, as Missouri style. It's, he was hollow, yes, but he was better at being hollow than Vance. I don't know if that makes sense. That's how I would put it. He's better at being hollow than Vance. I don't know. He did believe his own shit, maybe, is the way to put it. That's fair. We have a question earlier I do want to make sure I hit is asking about the René Girard, Thiel's favorite philosopher. We haven't today, and we probably won't be soon. We've gone over it a little bit in the Quarantine Collective because there's critiques are very easy, and it's a good place to use as a jumping off point. But there's not actually a lot of very, very deep or systemic thought in some of those things. There's close to it. There's touching into things, but we haven't spent a good deal. You're welcome to come push for things or explain maybe where we missed if you're into it. I'm not super there myself as a thing. It's when you start talking about like the Stanford connection for all this. Stanford is a fascinating sort of setup. It's worth looking at how that was founded and who founded it and where he came from and the race relations he was going through at the time when it was founded and who it was named after and all that fun stuff. It's kind of a riot and kind of horrifying too. It's never been anything good. And yes, it is revealing of Thiel's thought. But Thiel also, to just say, like, anyone if you're about Girard and informing, yes. Thiel's thought, Vance's thought, any of these things, they are, because they're built around the axiomatizing nature of thought and the concrete, the hardened idea of the oughts or the ways things are, the pre-organized elements of desire, you end up in a position where they are able to kind of move around and find ways to bring anything in. And so, because they're fascists, it's the way it works. So when you're pushing in that direction, everything kind of works and you're able to find ways to say something that makes sense to you or to that setup. So Girard, I don't want to say Thiel's thought is more complex than Girard is. It's informative to it, but there's a lot more happening there. Dark Knight, there's not as much imagination or possibilities, more how things are. And Thiel is A lot of his thought, honestly, if you've watched any of his recent interviews, is I would assume massive amounts of powdered Adderall snorted up the nose as his veins pulse out of his forehead. Just wild. Yeah. It's a lot. Ms. Dixon, we're going to get into mimetic theory. We're not going to be doing mimetic theory. We have a running joke in the DGQC that Lou started earlier today. It's good timing. Is mimetic theory is just social sciences for tech bros who haven't read books, which is a fucking good line. It's a good line. I think it's a good guy. Thiel a singularity guy? You know, Kurzweil is a fascinating dude. I'm sure they cross paths. I don't know if he's as a setup there. I don't know, but it's a whole thing. I described me accurately. Have I described you? I didn't mean to describe you. Did I describe you? That's okay. If I did, I hope it was lovely. Because we're coming into an end here. I've been going for 2.5 hours, and I did 3 hours earlier today on the nature of the differential and axiomatic inside of capital, and how capital ultimately relates to the nature of how calculus helps us find the infinitives and other things. My brain is like pouring out of my ear. The whole thing is a little bit much. Hugh says, is it as simple as Thiel responding to a deeply ingrained reverence well observed among certain type of bourgeois for elite and elitist institutions and achievements? It's a long enough question. You're going to make me take a second before I can answer. God damn it. It's good. Because the answer is more complex than a yes or a no, because I think there's something there that you're on. The way that capital functions, and this is where I diverge from traditional Marxism or post-Marxism. I specifically am in the Deleuze-Guattari crowd in that sort of direction. I'm not an accelerationist. I don't believe in accelerationism as a thing, nor do I believe D&G do. So I'm a very specific thing. DGQC as a thing, welcome to check it out. Big philosophy reading. We'd love other opinions. But for me, Thiel's social investments are kind of like all of ours. What he specifically, though, is dealing with is, especially at the wealthy side, it's a later books of Marx, but I love how Deleuze pulls it out and a handful of others, is he's almost they call him, because I want to get the phrasing particular, a capitalist eunuch. So his investments generally are into the larger scale systems, but the systems are actually producing for him. He's so deeply invested in the system that the things like the elements of the bourgeois or the elite, the position he's in isn't even bourgeois. He is so ingrained and deep within the nature of capital that his investments are in that very thing itself, in the nature of the way capital functions as it works. That thing that happens there, that sort of hyper deep belief and understanding in your organs being right in that position, like in that thing, that's the big deal. And I think it's for someone like Thiel, for someone like Musk, for someone like Bezos, we'd like to see them as people who are free to do anything or having all the choice. We talked about that a little bit earlier with the way J.D. Vance uses it. Choice is a funny thing in capital. It's not really kind of how anything works. And we like to perceive that the wealthy and bourgeois have a lot of choice. People who believe the bourgeois should have all of that choice, all the freedom they love. Someone like J.D. Vance, who's basically a sycophant for like ultimately anarcho-capitalism, is kind of his position as far as I've been able to glean. He's very odd. It's a Christo-fascist kind of side of that. So take it with a grain of salt. But the functioning of Peter Thiel is within the nature of capital itself. He's one and with it. So he has to kind of go along with it. His choices are made by the system. He is in it as much as anything else. He couldn't tomorrow, for example, decide, actually, I'm going to make all of my businesses communes and cooperatives with all the employees, and I'm going to change everything to being employee owned. He couldn't make that choice. He doesn't have that freedom. He doesn't actually have that power. he would be deposed effectively, and they'd remove him, just like they would for Bezos or Musk or anyone else in those positions. They're in a spot that the system is running them as much as anything else. I'm not saying to feel pity for a capitalist. Not at all. They are pure, cold, cynical things. But the people who are invested in them and their success are invested in the social order, and it's kind of an odd double play that's happening. They're invested in the certainty that comes with the social order. This is why you see a lot of J.D. Vance types and religious types and other people on the right really in that conservative mindset, because they want to return to the days of old, which were far more socialist than they are now. But they also want to move to a space of investment in that system. And this dichotomy is clear to a lot of people, but not to them, because they're so deeply invested in the system itself. So for me, Peter Thiel, his position in that, his relationship with others is basically, here are my organs, here is what I'm producing, allow me to attach to you. And as he's able to gain more and more of those people, it makes him feel more powerful, makes him feel like he's more expansive, makes him feel like he's more in control, despite really having effectively no power at all, which is kind of wild in terms of like his ability to affect the world. His effect on the world is massive. His affect, the ability for him to actually put himself out there is very limited. It's parasitical, but it's not, because he's just in the capitalist flows. He's just in there. He's not living off of the system. He is one in one with the system. It's wild. You can't scrub back in the VOD. What? Really? No, I have replay on here. Yep, I got replay on here. I might have to finish. It might be just too long at this point. Let me see. I will, interesting. I'm sorry about that, August. It is on my end too, and I don't know why. I have VOD. I have VOD there. I have VOD allowed here. I will make it live afterwards. I'm almost done anyway, because literally my brain is slowly dying as we do this. Genuinely, this has been lovely. All of you people have been lovely. It might be a copyright strike. I haven't gotten it, and I'm not seeing it. So who knows? A lot of other people were streaming it live, so I don't know. If I got one, so be it. I'll apologize. But if that's the case, it won't be live. Otherwise, we'll see if we can get it back up. It's been lovely tonight. It's been great seeing everyone and chatting through this. Please join us as a thing in the DGQC. We'd love to have you. And we'd love to talk more things. If you'd like to join us for more chats, if you'd like to support what we're doing, lots of ways to do that. Search around. Come say hi. I'm around. Thank all of you for everything. Let's see, where should I send you? I feel like I should send you somewhere, because I don't get to raid in anywhere, because usually I have 6 people. Fucking nobody ever joins what I'm doing. Okay, let's see. I can send you somewhere, I think, right? After stream. Aha. Let's see. Who is around? Who's around? We're going to send you to... because it'll be fun. We're going to send you into Aiko, who I never get to raid into. She's, as far as I can tell, the only person who's live. Let me see if I've got anyone else real quick. Kid's not up. Is anyone else up? Looks like me. Yeah, looks like me and, yeah, and a lot of other people doing that. I'm not going to raid into, I don't know any of these other people. I know that person, not rating into them. Megan Kelly has 135,000 watching. We'll pass on that. A lot of people talking debate tonight. Good. Good. I'm just glad. Because it's good stuff for people to be chatting. I'm going to raid you into Aiko. Give her the best. Say Brooks sends all the love. Because I think that would be great and fun. So we're going to do that. So thank all of you. We're going to do that. And with that, I'm going to be out of here. Thank you all.